Um, Good evening, and thank you so much for coming to the 15th edition of the Archives Public Lecture Series at NCBS. The Archives at NCBS is a space for the history of contemporary biology in India. We opened a few months ago. If you haven't been down there, I really encourage you to go down there after the talk. We have wonderful set of students who can sort of guide you through the space, and hope you sort of come there on a fairly regular basis. It is a public, open space that does not require any appointments, although we have a little bit of difficulty with the security. We're working on that. But it is a space for you to come and just sit and relax, to read, to make sense of histories, to talk to other people from different disciplines, and just get some context around your own work. On that vein, we're doing something slightly differently the last few talks, so it is my very great pleasure to introduce you to T. Jayashree. And T. Jayashree has been an independent filmmaker for the last 25 years, over 25 years, and more recently I've come to know her and her team because of their work in setting up Camera, which is the queer archive for memory, reflection, and activism. It's based in Cooktown in Bangalore, so for those of you in that neighborhood, please do go check it out. It's also a public space for you to come and sit, reflect, talk to the others who are working in that space. We have at least one person who uses two archives on a regular basis, so she's somewhere in this audience. Just a quick note on Camera. Camera is a gender and sexual minorities archive in India. It's a physical archive located in the southern city of Bangalore. While preserving memories through collecting and collating multimedia material, the archive aims to be a living one, creating and furthering activism around gender and queer issues. The idea of the archive emerged from the audio material that Jayashree has been collecting since 2001. And I wanted Jayashree to introduce Lakshmi as someone that she's known in the past, and I really look forward to Lakshmi's talk.
Thank you, Venkat. It's a novel way of introducing one archive to the other archive to the other archive. It gives me a great pleasure to meet Ambai again. I knew her as Ambai, and later I got to know that her name is S Lakshmi because through her short stories that I read. And in mid-90s, as a documentary filmmaker researching on dance and sexuality, I went to visit Sparrow in Bombay. They just started this archive, and one didn't really think so much about archive that time. We were filmmakers, we were looking for footage, we were looking for material, and we just went and spent an afternoon with her, and that was it. But a couple of years ago, when some of us in the queer community realized that we have to document queer lives in India, we held a workshop, and we invited Lakshmi, and she very graciously came and shared a whole range of ideas, and the why we should actually set up an archive that has to be physical space. Because at that time, all the queer folks were talking about digital archive because it's easy, it's, free, open source, we can do it, and all that stuff. But Lakshmi put this idea in our head that no, it has to be a physical space, and it has to be a living archive. It's not enough to just collect, but you need to also do something with the material, which speaks to you today. So it's very much like looking at the past in order to see what kind of a present we have so we can build a future on it. So that kind of was the emphasis for Camera, and it really gives me a pleasure to have her here today. And actually, I don't know how to introduce her, so I'm going to read up what the Library of Congress and Penguin says about her, which is very, very apt. So to give a background to her work, and she is actually one of the most distinguished fiction writers in Tamil, and she writes under the pseudonym Ambai, and she's one of the important writers today. Her works are characterized by her passionate espousal of the cause of women, humor, a lucid and profound style, and a touch of realism. Most of her stories are about relationships, and they contain brilliant observations about contemporary life. Exploration of space, silence, coming to terms with one's body or sexuality, and the importance of communication are some of the recurring themes in her works. Her stories have been translated by Lakshmi Holmstrom in 2 volumes entitled A Purple Sea and In a Forest a Deer. Ambai was awarded the Lifetime Literary Achievement Award of Tamil Literary Garden, University of Toronto, Canada for the year 2008. C.S. Lakshmi is also an independent researcher in women's studies for the past 30 years and has several publications to her credit. She's the founder trustee and currently the director of Sparrow, Sound and Picture Archives for Research on Women, which was established in the 90s, much before we even started talking about archives. And it's an independent archive, and it's my pleasure to invite Ambai to share her experience with us. Thank you.
There is no light there. Sorry for this beginning disturbances, because I always get a little nervous to talk at podiums, because the podiums sometimes are so high. People can see only my head because I'm very short, and I get very nervous about whether to shake my head or not. So I hope you don't mind if I'm half in and half out. What I would like to share with you all today is about not just setting up a women's archives based on women's life and women's history, but about how women get written into history and how women have really lived. Women get written into history not in ways based on their lived experiences, because the mainstream history writes about them in very different ways. Like you must have all heard now, people talk about women achievers. I really don't know what it means. Because every woman I've spoken to, I feel is an achiever. She has achieved something in life. Every mother who has taken a decision to send a daughter to college is an achiever for me. So I feel that I don't go by these general terms used for women who have done something with their lives. Normally, history writing is based on literature, pedagogy, and various other things, how it comes into the public sphere. But I feel that this is women in specific ways, in slots already allotted in history. So using literature, narratives, and performance and other sources, I would like to illustrate how specific this mainstream history is, and how we need to broaden it in a way that women become parts of their history on their own terms, not on terms decided by historians who work within certain methodologies and in certain manners. Recently, Penguin brought out a series of booklets with modernized goddesses, which became quite a rich, and you'll see quite a few of them. was a way of me defining goddesses and also bringing goddesses into the contemporary way women live. I feel that while it is a lot of fun to redefine goddesses and try to expand the meanings of what goddesses are, it is still a limiting experience because it misses out on several layers of meanings of the goddesses we know. It also misses out on several layers of lives of them. It brings these goddesses in these modernized definitions in specific ways into history. So what is it one wants? What one wants is a way of looking at women where women don't have to be defined in any specific ways and they can live out their lives beyond definitions. Because the basic question is, where is the need to justify your life in terms of some definition, whether it's a modernized definition or an older definition? Where is the need for that? That is the basic question you have to ask. For those of us who grew up in the post-independence decade, so our schooling was done in the 50s. And there were definitions already existing which went with our lives in certain ways. There were also ways in which we defined these definitions, about which I will tell you. So in all these definitions, what we found was that while growing up in these post-independence decades, when we had already come onto the streets and fought, and education was so important, and we felt that there is an essence which still remained when it concerned women. And what is to tell you that, I have to tell you a story. There was a famous team of artists called N.S. Krishnan and T.A. Madhura. And in 1951, they went to Moscow as part of a cultural delegation. And there, one of the items they performed was a song called Nalla Penmani, Miga Nalla Penmani, Kainattina Perikam Peni Nadapavali Avale Nalla Penmani. Why is it coming and I'm not asking for it? I didn't press it, it's still not. I think I'm pressing something here. Okay. So the song basically says that a good woman, a very good woman, is a person who nurtures the national culture. The song then goes on to say many things, that she should wake up in the morning and she should wash her clothes and she should go to school, she should study, and she should help her mother in the kitchen, and she should take wise counsel of her father. And when she gets married, she should never praise her parental family and her marital family because it will create conflicts. And she should never fight with her husband. And in all difficulties, she should be able to guard her dignity. And such a woman who nurtures the national culture is a good woman, a very good woman. For nearly a decade, this song dominated our lives. Whenever some guests came home, or when there was some occasion in the school, we were asked to dance to this Nalla Penmani, Miga Nalla Penmani. The trouble was how to do Abhinaya for a Nalla Penmani. How does this good woman know? There should be certain Abhinaya we should be able to do for a Nalla Penmani, you know. So we wondered, you know. So we all used to put on a very benign face when it came to doing Abhinaya for a Nalla Penmani. But you'll notice this very interesting song, because while it talks about a woman in what is within quotes a traditional manner, there are a lot of different things in the song. The song talks about education, that she should go to school. It's a kind of recall of all these struggles that had been put up for women's education. And also it's a kind of a symbolic metaphor of what Bharati talked about as soon as we get up in the morning, education, and then music that will melt your heart. Bharati had said. It also it talks of music, but it says that she should know to sing folk music. She should know how to sing songs of the people, basically. There's a catch in that also, because only a particular community of artists used to perform at the time. There were others who were also learning, but performance was done only by these women. So there is a lot of history in the song. And another important thing is that nurturing the national culture was never a quality of a woman before this song. Here, nurturing the national culture becomes one of the qualities of a good woman. So there are lots of changes. So what we get out of this is that tradition is not static. It is changing, and it has elements in it which oppose it. It contains them. It contains the opposition and lets opposition happen. But there is a notion of tradition being static constantly. It is this constant notion that tradition is static that defines women. That when all the cores, all the essence of ego, there is a certain core which is the basis of being a woman. I call this base the body. So that the qualities of the women are biological, that come with the qualities of motherhood and nurturing, come with us naturally as a biological quality. And that is a quality of the woman. That notion remains despite the fact of so many historical changes. That is why the song can talk of a little girl to a married woman, as if time and space and history don't touch women at all. That they remain women, whatever age they are in. That qualities remain, they never change. So this notion of tradition being static is there all the time. There are people who have done different kind of ways of looking at women and the nation and other things. It is true that the need to define women comes because women are seen as the authenticators of the cultural identity. So when you are an authenticator, then you have to be defined in specific ways because you are the guardian of this identity. There are historians who have kind of dichotomized this cultural domain and called it inside and outside. Inside is the home, outside is the world. And the home is a spiritual domain. And the outside the world of politics and intrigues and other things, the public sphere. And the spiritual domain belongs to women, and the public domain belongs to men. These kind of dichotomization has been done by some historians like I think this is only one way of looking at it. Because when you really study women's lives, you see that this inside and outside, this home and the world, are constantly running into each other. They are not as separate as we imagine them to be or as we want them to be. But they constantly run into each other in all the dealings. And the borders are not as definite as we think they are. The borders are very blurred between this home and the world. But because of this notion of home and the world, there are certain ways that women make entry into the world. And everything that they do has to be rendered feminine. So when they enter the public sphere, they're told to nurture the national culture. Because they are nurturers, so they have to nurture the national culture. They have to retain their feminine quality. So this gives an image of a woman coming out of the home and going into the world. Whereas in real life, it really doesn't happen like that. It has happened as naturally as swimming from one shore to another. But still, the scene has two different, totally contradictory shapes. That's why in cultural movements, in identity politics, you will find many familial terms like father, elder brother, and younger brother, Ambai, Anna, Ambai, and Amma, and words like that. These words exist for men also. But in the case of men, it becomes a certain kind of male bonding, not necessarily based on familial terms. But in the case of women, they happen only because they are women. And the terms become relevant for them only as women. So all these familial terms come into politics when a woman is part of the outside world. She should constantly remain a woman who is a mother, sister, or something of somebody. There is no way she can just be a woman in politics. She has to be related in familial terms. And you also know that very strong, powerful women are always compared to Durga. You know, Indira Gandhi was called Durga. And Haapus was do a painting of her as Durga. And in 1993, when Jayalalitha had her 45th birthday, they were posters all over Tamil Nadu, and one of the posters, she was portrayed as a goddess. And in 1994, during Christmas, there was a poster of her as Mother Mary. That she is not only a goddess, but she is also somebody who is going to nurture you as a mother, as a goddess. So when we talk about women in the outside and inside and these things, when we write the history and we talk about this word empowerment, which has become so important these days, we realize that it is not an easy word to use, because what empowers one woman and disempower another one, and what empowers at one time and disempower at another time, and also who determines what is empowerment is not devoid of politics. this, I'll tell you another story about just when it started Sparrow in 1988. The center in Bangalore was going to do a workshop on women's empowerment. And they asked me to come and direct the proceedings for 3 days. And saying all the NGOs will come, even NGOs run by men, they will all come. And I came. The first day, each NGO was asked to introduce themselves and their work. And almost every other NGO was saying, under empowerment program, that they give sewing machines to widows. They give sewing machines to widows. That's how we empower them. And we encourage them to grow kitchen gardens. And these are our empowerment programs for widows. So, by the time all of them had introduced themselves, empowerment began to sound like a bad word. And so when they all went for a tea break, I wrote on the blackboard, no more sewing machines and kitchen gardens for the next 25 years. They came back and saw that, and the NGOs which were run by men, they were very angry. Because they thought it was male bashing. Not that I wanted men to be given sewing machines, but the thing is that this image in your mind, you see all Hindi films and Tamil films, the moment a woman becomes a widow, she sits in the sewing machine and she starts stitching. And that's how they show that time is going fast. And it's a ridiculous image. And all the NGOs were perpetuating that image. That was the kind of image they were. Recently, I spoke to an activist from UK. She had come for a meeting there. I was also there. She told me that just from 4 or 5 years ago, a European under had sent her 20 sewing machines. And the women in her village, they said, we don't want to stitch, we want computers. Nobody had seen those sewing machines are lying there. Who told them we wanted sewing machines? Because sewing machines have really become linked with empowerment. Also kitchen gardens. I wish somebody else could grow kitchen gardens. I don't want to grow them myself. There's nothing wrong in growing kitchen gardens, but the thing is when it becomes gender specific, then there is something wrong in the way we are looking at sources of development and empowerment. But don't think that this is the story only in India. I was in Uganda some time back, and a European funding agency had set up in a village there an audiovisual resource center. What they had done was they put 2 computers there, and they brought a pretty literate African woman and told us that she can operate this computer on the basis of visual instructions. So I wanted to see what the computer is instructed. The whole program was about how to grow hens and vegetables at a vegetable garden. The computer was telling her to do that, and she was pressing the whole thing. And there were books in that audiovisual resource center which only the voice came and used. And they had a jeep which women could use when they went to different villages, to tell other villages how to keep hens and grow vegetables. There were jeep drivers were mad. And finally, on the last day, the young girls came and did a lovely African dance, and they all said they feel very empowered. Old women came and said they feel very empowered because of this program. And time they had an exhibition where they showed big vegetables, pumpkins, they looked so big, and hens looked very healthy, and they laid more eggs, and all because of computer. And at the end of it, the European Under's leader, she got up and she said that I brought you something that's going to make you very happy. She told these African men. I was wondering what she was going to give them. She opened her bag and she removed goggles. She had brought goggles for all of them, you know. They looked a little surprised, but they stood in a queue and took one goggle each, thinking that maybe this is also for empowerment. So, the way empowerment is seen by funders and the way we want to be empowered, very different. And the moment empower means 100 sewing machines to 100 widows, we should say we don't want to be empowered this way. And women have it. That's the only thing that will change policies. This notion of empowerment is woven into the so-called developmental policies. It is very tempting to see in this process of development policy women as victims or women as Shaktis, the great Shaktis who can do everything. But I see that these definitions are like formations that surround women. But these formations have been broken many times. So one should not imagine that these definitions have controlled women all the time. And another thing is that it's not all the time broken in ways that we can see. And there are also women who have succumbed within this yuga of definitions, like Abhimanyu, who did not know how to come out of the yuga. But these formations refuse to go because they exist like unused atomic weapons. You know? They may not be used, but they're there constantly. And that is the reality of peace that we should know. Even when a woman lives a perfectly happy, satisfied, contented life, she should know that those unused weapons are there, which can be used to attack her. So the idea is to know what these weapons are and how to not just defend yourself, but defend other women who are faced with it. And that's how we have to look at women's history and age. And I always give an example of how women have manipulated their ways out of these definitions. We had an Alsatian dog in our house. Its name was Lily. And ours was a purely vegetarian house. And Lily was very close to my mother, but my mother didn't allow Lily to come inside the kitchen. Lily couldn't come inside the kitchen. But Lily wanted to be with my mother all the time. So what she would do, she would put her entire body in the kitchen. Just leave the hind legs and tail out. And she pretends that she is not in the kitchen. So I feel that our mothers, grandmothers, and women before us did that. They pretended that they were very much within tradition, but they were breaking it all the time. They were breaking it in ways that were not really visible, but they were there. So you will know only when you talk to them. You will know only when you know about women's lives. And you won't know when you just read a history book, because the history book doesn't include these tactics with which women live. There are many women who have come into public life, but there have always been kind women give up what this Indian womanhood is, you know. In 1921, Sarojini Naidu wrote a letter to her young daughter, Ragamani Naidu, and you'll notice that she stressed this. She tells us that never forget that you should not give up this Indian women, the responsibility of Indian women. Always remembering that you're a symbol of India. This is something that in the 1920s, all women who came out into the public sphere, they had to constantly remember this. When you read this, the quotation, I can understand how she says it with a lot of love, that don't forget that these are things that are which are very important, because there is an existing tradition in this country. You remove the bad things of the tradition, but never forget that you're a symbol of the country. So these are very interesting. There was a politician called Satyamurthy, and he was a very powerful Congress politician, and he wrote some very nice letters to his partner, and he says that there is freedom in marriage, and marriage is very important. And he says it's not easy for a woman to earn a job and live by the sweat of and he says women must have greater economic freedom, but it should not be taken to extremes. So what are extremes? It doesn't define that. What are the extremes you're talking about? Then of course he talks about the dharma of the Hindus, because there was always this fear that the educated woman will break the family, you know. I remember that when Sparrow was going to raise some funds, we organized a painting exhibition, and we needed some initial money to do the brochure, you know, not a small amount. So we had written to your trust, you know. So they said that, okay, we'll give you this amount. It was on amount 50,000 or something. So they asked me to come and take the check. So I went there, and the trust, the director himself was there, and he said, I'm so happy I've come to receive this check, and he gave me the check. I took the check and put it in my purse. After which he told me, I hope you're not one of those feminists. So I didn't know whether to give the check back or keep it. So I told him, why did he say that? He said that because feminists break families. Look how long this image has followed the educated woman. The woman who is householder was kept in opposition to this educated woman. Constantly, whether it is travel stories or Hindi films or anything, the educated woman is in opposition to the householder who has got certain qualities. So, Satyamurthy saying this doesn't surprise me. But when the director of a trust tells me the same thing, then one has to be surprised, because this is 1992 that he is saying this. And then he also says that the public life, it's not conducive to the nature of women. What is, even if they are in public life, women must not forget that they are women. These constant fears are there. And then Rajagopalachari was, he was not against women coming into public sphere, but he wanted them to treat the public sphere as their homes. Public sphere should be one of their concerns, like they have concern for food and children and husband. They should also have concern for the nation. The nation must be their extended family. So this constant way of looking at women's entry into the public life as an extension of her home. You know. This was a constant thing that was happening throughout the freedom movement, after the freedom movement. And how did women transform themselves then? And I'm reminded of the two phrases, pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. These are two phrases that Romain Rolland used. But there is a quantum physicist called Stephenson. He has made these two things into his logo statements in his blog. He says that pessimism of the intellect only means be a scientist. Ask questions. Never accept anything that you don't ask. Why is it so? Is my position right? And keep asking those questions. And here, optimism of the will, it only means the courage to attempt difficult things. And sometimes will can overcome odds, these things. And in this optimism of the will, and also the humility to say, I don't know, I feel that is how women have transformed themselves. When they have asked questions and they don't know the answer, they have said, I don't know. But they have not stopped at that. They said, I don't know, but I'll still go ahead and face it. That's how women have survived all these definitions and formations. So it's very difficult to see them in typical definitions like victims or shaktis. So they have been both. They have been victims, they've also been shaktis. I feel that there are not definite borders to that. And in certain aspects of their life, they may have given in. In certain other aspects of their life, they have won. And sometimes they have done it so quietly. I'll give you a very small example. It is something I say about my mother always. I've told it so many times that I feel that in every meeting it's necessary for someone to know what she says. I grew up in Bangalore and I studied in Maharani's College. And when I finished my BA, the Mysore University got bifurcated into Bangalore and Mysore. By the time I decided that I wanted to leave home, and as you know, education is a very good excuse to leave the house. So I told my parents that I want to do my MA in Madras Christian College in Madras. My father was working in Kottayam at that time, in the rubber board. So he came and he said that, why don't you do your MA in Bangalore? What's wrong with Bangalore University? You can do it in Bangalore. So I told him it's a new university and MCC is an old college and all kinds of excuses I gave. He said, I'm not going to permit it and I'm not going to give you the money for it. And those days, you got poor and I was pocket money. How can you save enough money to study? So I was just sitting in my room and wondering, how am I going to do this? I got admission in MCC already. I secretly applied. I borrowed 10 rupees from my sister who was working in a bank and I got admission because I had a first class. So my mother came to my room and she asked, do you think going to Chennai will make a difference in your life? I said, of course it will make a difference. She didn't say anything. She went to the bank and those days you could take a gold loan. And she kept her chains and she took money from the bank. She handled all the banks because my father was in Kottayam. And she went to the shop and she got a suitcase. And she got 4 sarees, cut-off sarees. Because I used to wear half sarees when I was doing my BA. So she thought that the daughter was going to do MA, so she needs sarees. So she got 4 cut-off sarees in very light colors because my mother considered me dark and that I should not wear dark sarees. So she got this yellow and pink and blue and a very light violet color saree with small prints. petticoat. Those days we didn't have ready-made petticoats. So she came home, she was very good seamstress. So she stitched the blouses and she stitched the petticoats and we were ready to go. My sister came back from the bank in the evening. So she looked at all this preparation. It's okay. I should have put it off. And my sister said, you didn't do this for me? Yes, my mother. My sister was a graduate. So my mother said, you didn't ask for it. You had to ask. Only then I can do it for you. You said you wanted to get married. So my sister couldn't say anything. So the next night we were sitting in the train. There was no reservations. We sat in this night mail and reached Chennai. We had to get down at Central Station and we have to go to Park Station to take the electric train to Tambaram, where NCC was. So we took the electric train and just as the train was entering Tambaram, my mother leaned towards me and she told in my ear, all Lakshmi's dreams are going to come true. It was a very poignant moment in my life and I never forgot that. So when I did this research on musicians and dancers, and I brought for 2 volumes. My mother was a musician. So I narrated this incident and I wrote to my mother, Alamedu, an artist and a dreamer. I dedicated this. My mother read it. She could read English but not speak very well. So my mother read it and she said, did I say that? So I wanted to tell her she had said much more. That's what oral history is about. The person who speaks can forget, but the person who hears those words can never forget. That's why oral history is very important, I feel, when we talk about women's history. And how easily my mother had broken the rules and my father had said, I can't be spent. And she came back from China. She sent a telegram to my father saying, Lakshmi admitted with her Christian father. So what could my father do? He started sending me money every month. And he did question my mother. But I think later he gave her the money to take the jewels back because she had pledged those chains. I think he did that also. He was a very well brought up husband. Brought up by my mother. So he was a wonderful person. But my father came from a very, very poor family. And when he got married, he didn't know how to wear chappals. My mother taught him how to wear slippers. So he was a person who was very scared to break rules. But my mother was very bold. She would just break all the rules because she said that's the way it should be. She was the eldest of 10 children, so I think that she knew how to do this. She was like Lily, she broke everything. When my father died in 1981, he died of cancer. So I went to my brother's place. He was staying with my little brother in Bombay. So I told my brother that don't tell me that women can't come to the cremation ground and all that. I'm going to come. So he said, okay, do what you want. And in Bombay, you don't have these volunteers. They have these hearse that comes. And when they put this thing there, and they remove it. So my father's body was placed in the hearse. So I went and sat near the body. So after some time, after about 5 minutes, I saw my mother coming and sitting next to me. So I asked her, what are you doing? She said, I'm coming to the cremation ground. So the Rohits, they got very scandalous, and they told the mother that, Shastras say that women can't come to the cremation. So my mother spoke very softly and nicely. She said, you tell me which Shastras say that. If you can quote the Shastra, then I see what I mean. But they couldn't, because Shastras would say that. It's just a practice, So she said, I'm coming. So she came to the cremation ground, and as my brother lit the fire, she sang a song which my father likes very much. And there was not a tremor in her voice. She finished the song, and she just did namaste, and she went back home. She did all this very good. My mother didn't know she was a feminist. But I'm sure in everyone's life there has been some aunt, some mother, some grandmother who has taken such a decision. We know about it only when we talk to them. Otherwise, we won't know at all. That is why it is important to look at women's history in such a way that women's voices can come out, not in ways in which you hear women's voices, but in other ways. There are many folk songs in which women have expressed. This is a Persian folk song where the woman says, don't send me in marriage because I have to fetch water. This is a Persian song where they go a long distance to fetch water. There have also been songs written by widows, barren women, and women who yearn for sons. They have written songs about that. Women have also written about their desires, about being independent, about being assertive, like Asma Devi, Anta, Lal Devi. A lot of them have written. In fact, Ambai once wrote this one. She says that if women are all this, you call them seductive and deceptive and other things, if a woman's body is so harmful, how will I reach truth? If these are the things you have dumped on my body, it's not as if women are not questioned. They have expressed their lives. They've also questioned what has happened. From these type of women emerged those others who marched on the roads during the freedom struggle and before, who asked for rights, who went to jail during the freedom movement. But not just in our country, in many other countries, they see again this pattern of women coming out and going in. Even Castro told the Cuban women after the revolution, now women can go back to homes and be mothers and teachers. Even revolutionaries think like that about women. So these women have marched on the roads for us. So in spite of what we did was we collected photographs of women marching on the road from 1931 onwards. And we called it marching on the roads, making oneself, making the nation. And making oneself, making history. And we didn't want it to be a gallery-based photo exhibition because these women had marched on the roads. So what we did was through an advertising agency, we hired 4 double-decker buses in Bombay, going in 4 different directions. And we blew up these photographs and we pasted them on the buses. Just as they paste the advertisements, we put them, and the buses kept flying on the Bombay roads for 20 days with those photographs. And people were quite shocked. We had given Sparrow's number. They rang up and they asked, we saw this women's bus, what does it mean? And it was wonderful the way people reacted. So these are some of the photographs we put up. This is 1931 photo. an equity. Here to come and help me with this. Next. तुम्हारा battery बंद हो गया. See, it never happens in women's organizations that we go in town. I always do it. This is a plot. इधर से करती हूँ ना मैं, ऊपर नीचे. इसके बाद करती हूँ. इधर करो. हाँ, इसका रिमोट में बैटरी नहीं. एक कर. Archivists. सही चला गया वो. चला करो. अब पीछे जाओ. 1931 को जाओ. और पीछे. हाँ, ठीक है. अभी करो. ये मेरी क्या है? Next करो. अच्छा ठीक है. Okay, I'll come to those photographs when I can because it's all gone here. Oh, photographs, thanks. Okay. Next करो. नहीं, but this is the next photographs are not coming at all. Okay, I showed the photographs whenever Venkat said this right. So these were photographs he used 56, I want.
We can go through this. We can go through this. This is log space. Log space?
56, I want.
There's one slide that I think is problematic. So
the next one is shown.
Sorry guys, just a minute.
Then you can go to the next one.
So you can go to 1950, 1940, 1950, like 50.
to 15. Okay. 49 it comes to. Okay. But the full thing won't come. Yes, it's okay, shall I do next? Continue. Yeah, second.
I think you can go forward.
No, but
Just go forward.
now, when we started collecting life stories of women, one of the women we first mentioned was Dashni Ben Chowdhury. Dashni Ben Chowdhury is a tribal. She's an Adivasi activist, and she took part in the Bardoli Satyagraha. And when she was arrested, they asked her, what are the details about you? What is your life about? She answered, Bharat is my village, and the struggle for independence is my work. And she was put in the same jail as Kasturba. And the story goes that she taught Kasturba how to read and write. And she had a letter from, she says, from Gandhi, thanking her for teaching Kasturba how to read and write. And not many people even knew about her when we went, but her sons and others. And we have an interview with Dashri. Then there was Pravina Bennatbai Patel, who, along with her mother, she lived a life like a saint, and both of them were committed to educating the underprivileged children throughout their lives. They educated us. And everyone must know Shamita. She ran an underground radio during the freedom struggle, and she was arrested. And the judge told her, we are going to jail you, but if you give a letter of apology, then we'll let you go. We'll release you. So mother used to send her food to the jail every day. And in one chapati, inside the chapati, she had left a note saying, never apologize. So Shamita never apologized. She finished her jail term and she came out. Malti Jaleri's father, he had been given a lordship by the British government. But she decided to follow Mahatma Gandhi. And throughout her life, she remained a Gandhi. Meera Desai, at the age of 70, she was studying in Elphinstone College. And she went for one of the protests and she was arrested. Her grandfather had come to accept her Abba title. And the granddaughter was in the jail for protesting. And her parents told her that you are very young. And maybe you should just say sorry and come out of the jail. She said, but I don't want to apologize. But I granted to her parents that a 17-year-old girl saying, I'm not going to apologize, and the parents accepting it and saying, okay, you don't apologize, it doesn't matter. We won't force you to apologize. So that was the understanding. Now, Bhimabai Bhagat is a very famous person in Maharashtra. She became a widow at the age of 19 with a child in her womb. And she finally goes to administering the farms of her father. She did all that. And in 1942, she gave shelter to many of the freedom fighters who came and who went underground. And she is considered one of the stars of the Samyukta Maharashtra movement. And she was never afraid to speak her mind. She became a operator at one point. And during the Samyukta Maharashtra, there was a meeting in which she had to sit on the same stage as Yashwantrao Chavan. Now, Yashwantrao Chavan and they didn't see eye to eye on many things. So, this was 1956. So she went on the stage, but he was the chief guest, and just before he was going to talk, she had hidden a black flag in her sari. She took out the black flag and she shouted, "Oh, Surya is Chalteva means get out." And Suryaji figure was one of the traitors during Shivaji's times. And once she organized a black flag protest against Jawaharlal Nehru. She was not afraid. In Maharashtra, when someone does something very courageous, they say Bhima Bai Parakram. That they are so courageous like Bhima Bai. So Bhima Bai is a very known person in Maharashtra. And now Dr. Krishna Bai Nipkar, not many of you will know. She finally lived in Pune. She was actually a person who lived in Chennai. And her mother had huge farms outside in Tirunelveli, and Krishabai Nimkar was a doctor. And in those days, she married without Mangalsutra. And her mother was a little upset, but the mother accepted the marriage. And Dr. Nimkar was much older than her. And she was very active in the freedom movement. And she has written 2 books on her political memories. When I knew her, at one point something was happening in Delhi, and she wanted to go on a satyagraha in front of the Rashtrapati Bhavan, And some of us had to persuade her that these methods don't work now, and she wanted to go alone and sit there. She was such a strong person. And Mukta Venkatesh, she is the daughter of a very famous Tamil writer called Madhavaiya. And when I met her, she was 102 years old, and she was a painter. She painted flowers. And she told me that she was a very staunch Gandhian. And in the early 30s, when she got married with a Gandhi sari. These women never wrote all these things. And everybody thought all these women were like controlled and things like that. But these women did what they really wanted, and they were not afraid to do that either. Suniti Chaudhary is from Bengal, and at the age of 14, she was a revolutionary. She went and shot this magistrate Stevens, who had given some judgment against the revolutionaries. She was so small that her finger could not reach the trigger, so she used the middle finger to use the gun, and she shot at him. Her daughter Bharati Sen has written a book on her, and she's got it on her. Lakshmi Devi Naidu, whom I met, she was in INA, and when I met her and I interviewed her, I told her she never got married. So I asked her, how come you never got married? She said, I didn't feel like it. And she said that when we were disbanded, we were told that you'll be called back sometime. And she said, I'm waiting for that call. And it's such a commitment, Now, these are many because Andhra is from the freedom movement. Appa Manas, Arya Agnikar, Manju Gandhi, Minakare are all from the left movement, including Roni. Premapuram was very active in the Goa freedom struggle. Maniammai, Nagammai, and Kattammal Ambai and Ambai areas too. Anamadu was his sister. Now, earlier, I think, towards the end of life, she lost her sight, but she wanted to join a march. So someone asked her, Ayeta, you can't see, how are you going to join this march? She said, I've lost my sight, I've not lost my vision, she said. And she joined the march. So these women remained very staunch in whatever cause they supported. Now, I don't know how many of you know Ruqayya Hussain. A book has come out now on her, so many of you may know about her. She wrote the first science fiction story. And she started a school for girls in Bhagalpur in 1909 and in Calcutta in 1970. Schools for Muslims. And two of her stories are very famous. One is called Admara, which is about homes for destitute women, where women control the home. And another one is called Sultana's Dream, that is a science fiction. And establishing schools for girls actually couldn't have happened in a vacuum. In 1898, Sister Nivedita had set up a school for girls in Banbazar. And I'm sure that Ruqayya knew about this, because very close to Sister Nivedita was a person called Sarah Campbell. And in the Sultana's Dream story, Sarah comes as a character named Sister Sarah. Because Sarah was so spiritual, they called her Saint Sarah, they used to call her. So I think that there are so many connections. And I was surprised on 9th December, some time back, I think 2016 or something, there was a mail on Ruqayya Hussain and on Sultana's Dream, and then praising Ruqayya as the first feminist. And the mail came from very unexpected quarters. It came from Amar Chitrakatha, that they mentioned her as the feminist who wrote the first science fiction story. And what was the story about? It was a story about a utopian nation where women ruled. And women did everything with the help of technology. They even flew planes. And the story was written and published in 1905. And it was published in Indian Ladies magazine, which was published from Chennai. And of course, the editor was Kavala Satyanathan. And what did the men in this utopian nation do? They were all secluded. They lived in separate quarters. They cooked and took care of the garden and everything. And they were inspired by the women. And the women ran the country. And if there was a neighbor who fought with them, the women fought with them without resistance. Through their intelligence, they stopped the war, unlike men who would use weapons. They didn't need weapons. So it's a very interesting story. And Aman wrote it in 1905. It's fantastic. If you have not read the book on Ruqayya, please read it, because the story is there translated and is a very interesting story. Now, Siddhi Junaida Begum, many of you won't have heard of. Siddhi Junaida Begum was born in 1917, 3 years after the Queen Mary's College was started in Chennai. And I don't know if she knew about Queen Mary's College, but her father worked in a ship, and so he was a very bad person, but he didn't educate her. She studied only till 3rd standard. But her brother was a very bad person. And she has given an interview where she says that she read many things. And some of her articles are very amazing. So she wrote on women's education, just like Ruqayya. She says that there are people who say that this kind of education will spoil women. She says, won't this kind of education spoil men? She says, how come men don't get spoiled and only women will get spoiled? She writes all this in Tamil. And she says that these women have to exist amidst poisonous snakes. She calls all these men who are stopping women from education as poisonous snakes. And she writes very beautifully. She quotes she quotes Archivists, the Tamil poets, named poets, and she quotes from English books, Shakespeare, and then she talks about Krishna, and she was an extremely well-read woman. And she says, how come women in the past have been so educated? Why can't women get educated? No, what is stopping them? Do you want them to only get married and beget children for you? And she writes very strongly about these things. And she must have read English books because Anthony Hope's A Prisoner of Zenda. Based on that, she writes this novel, Kadala Kadamina. She writes, of course, she makes it into a Tamil kind of a Rajarani story. And they say that later when NGR made Nadodi Mandan, it was based on this, a novel of hers, And she was capable of not only writing, but she was capable of asserting herself. And I wrote a long article on her. And my regret is that when I was doing my book on women writers, The Face Behind the Mask book, she was alive. She lived a very long life. But I didn't know about her. Nobody had told me about her. Because she had not published in these other journals which I checked. And the journals in which she wrote, they were not archived. So I had not seen those journals at all. And now this book, they have archived it in Sparrow, because old journals don't exist. And this book was brought out much later by her grandson. All of you must know Latisha, who is a poet from Hyderabad, and she also runs a women's organization. But I must tell you about Kondapalli Koteshwarama. Kondapalli Koteshwarama was married to Kondapalli Sitaramaya. She became a child widow at a very young age. And then others persuaded, the parents were into the freedom struggle movement, and they persuaded them to marry her to Kondapalli Sitaramaya. Kondapalli Sitaramaya, as you know, was an actual leader. And she lived with madam. It was not an easy life, because whenever these men went underground, the women were given the responsibility to take care of the safe house they could come to. And then the men would come, and if the woman became pregnant, she had to abort herself. So she had undergone abortion like that, and it was very difficult. She says, I could have died in that. But at some point, Sitaramaya does something wrong, like getting involved with another woman, and she just tells them, and people are asking me about this other woman, and you say that she's just your friend, and so what should I answer them? What should I tell them? She just asked them. He says that, don't forget that you were a widow when I married you, and I brought you in a prospection after marriage. I gave you dignity, don't forget. And the next day he leaves the house. Then she goes and continues her studies. She becomes warden of the hostel. And the children study in college and grow up, and she has several tragedies in her life. Her daughter commits suicide, and then her son, he also becomes revolutionary, dies because of police atrocities. He stands through them all. And the granddaughter at one point comes and tells us that Ataya is very sick. Sitaramaya is very sick. He wants to see you. She doesn't say anything. The party people come and tell her Sitaramaya wants to see you. She says, you never asked me whether I want to see him. You're saying that he wants to see me, but I don't want to see him. At the most crucial point in my life, when my children were small, he left me. I don't want to see him. But then when he became very sick, the granddaughter brings him home, and he's kept upstairs, and she never goes up. Then one day they say that he really wants to see, and she goes up. So when Sitaramaya sees it, he starts crying. So she asks him, why are you crying? I've cried so much in my life that my tears have dried up. And she just calms down. And then Sitaramaya dies. And she kept that position that this man has insulted me. And he may be the greatest leader, but I'm not going to have anything to do with him. Then, very late in her life, she writes this autobiography called Nijjana Bharati. It means unequal bridge. That our life was a bridge between the freedom fighters movement and the left movement. But now, in her life, on that bridge, there is nobody. And she just died last year. So it's very inspiring. It's translated into English, book. It's not a biography. Now, all of you will know about Amit Dalwai, who died very young, but you will not know about Marinisa Dalwai. Marinisa Dalwai fought for uniform civil code along with her husband. Her husband died very young. But she carried on with the work. But they would always say that Marinisa carried on Amit Dalwai's work. He had worked only for 15 years. She worked for 45 years. But still she is carrying on her husband's work only. She came to our office and we interviewed her. She wrote a beautiful autobiography in Marathi called I'm Content. And she didn't waver from this position till at last, even when they said that Muslim women must not demand this thing, she said, no, this is the demand we must have. And this Army India Circular was written by Urmila Pawar and her friends, Dalit friends, who were very much part of the Ambedkar movement. We also made it. Now, I don't know how many of you know Sister Lakshmi. She was a child widow who established the first widow's home in Chennai, in Ice House. And her intention was not to protect the widows, but to educate them. She said, it's not enough to say that widows must be remarried. Like even Gandhi was saying that everybody must come forward and marry widows. She said, no. Widows must get educated. Why shouldn't they just marry, And many of the early doctors and teachers and others in the Madras presidency came from this home that she had set up. And Gangutai Patwardhan is an educationist. She studied in Karve school. And these photographs I've got from her collection, from her private paper collection. These are all Karve school photographs. Everyone we taught to cycle and swim. And Parvati Ketarve was also from Karve school, and she did all the administration work. She even went abroad. So that person also went abroad. Now, Sarla Devi Court, you may not know, but you will know Neema Kadambi. She is a doctor who lives in Bangalore. And Sarla Devi Kot was her grandmother. Now Sarla Devi Kot lost her parents when she was 2 years old, and she became a widow at the age of 9. Then later, through help of some relatives, she went to Karvati school and she became a doctor. She was 29 when she became a doctor. And there was a public speech somewhere where Gopal Rao Kot, he was a Gandhian, he was saying that women must be empowered and widows must get educated and they must remarry. So, Sarla Devi, she was chief mistress at the time. She got up and she said, it's all very easy to say this in a speech, saying that widows must remarry and all. Do you have the guts to do what you preach? She said, I'm a child widow and I'm also a doctor. Will you marry me? Public proposal. And he said, yes. That's how she married Gopal Rao. And both of them were doctors in Africa for a long time. And it's a very interesting story, her life. Not many people know about it. So now at the age of 98, she wrote her autobiography. And one of the things she says is that I hated being a woman because it placed so many restrictions on me. She says that whatever I did, there was some obstacle because I was a woman. And she tried to change her life and that of people around her. She comes from Ambai. Shahjahan Appa and Satyarani Chadda, you must have heard the names. They were two people from Delhi who fought against dowry. And Veena Majumdar and Subhadra Bhuttalia, who established the anti-dowry cell, and Lotika Sarkar, who was the first one to sign this thing against the Matka rape case, which changed the rape law. And now we can't forget scientists. And you have many scientists here. All of them are important in many different fields. And right in the medical is Anamani. Now, there are many scientists, like for example, Amnasoni, who was the first chemist. And he was the first student of C.V. Raman. But I won't say such a nice thing about Anamani. Anamani retired as the director of the meteorological department, but her doctorate was never accepted by C.V. Raman. And he must have had his reasons for saying so. And the doctorate lay there for a long time. And there were two other students of C.V. Raman. And both of them had also given their doctorates. And C.V. Raman was not approving it, or he was not passing it. So two of them get into a suicide pact. And one of them dies, one of them survives, name is Nandabai. But even the person who died, she didn't even get a doctorate posthumously. As for Anamani, she never got her doctorate. So it was not an easy life, but these women faced things slowly. Like there was Chandrakanta Keshavan. She is Mughal Keshavan's mother, and she was an acoustic engineer in All India Radio. And she had two children. So this her superior. He wrote a confidential report, note on her. He had to write his confidential report in government office. He wrote that she was preoccupied with her two children. And the person who wrote this, he had 7 children. So she told him that if you can work with 7 children, so can I with just 2 children, you know. So it was not as if it was easy to function even as scientists. And the story really of this suicide pact was something that really bothered me for a long time. But interesting, Dr. Manju Reddy, she was in East Bengal at the time. And the book is very troubled, and so she had to wear a burqa, and they won't give her SSC or water school final exams. And when she came back, and his family purified her, not for wearing the burqa, but for giving the exams. For studying, they purified her. It's on fire, she told me. And Rajendraji, she's a mathematician, she's in Chandigarh. And she had to dress up as a boy because the only school in that place was a boys' school. So she had, for 1 year, she dressed up as a boy and studied in that school. So I think people have done tremendous things. So we have put many of these stories together in this book on women in science, which I hope NCBS values. This is Chandrakant engagement. And now you have all the Adma awards, different things. Lakshmi Booty makes 500 herbal medicines. And here is a woman who was selling vegetables and she made her son a doctor. And Rani Bangina, they run a hospital for tribals in Gadchiroli. And Sita, there she works for Devadas and And Sulagati Narasamma, she died recently. She's a midwife. She has delivered 15,000 children free of charge because she works only as an agricultural laborer. And for delivering children, she doesn't take money. And Elkina is a Gandhian, she is from Nagaland. And Vijay Lakshmi Navanita Krishnan, she collects tribal and folk music. And Nanamal is the famous yoga teacher. She died just this year. She's 99 years old. And these are the recent nowadays, they're all people who are working for environment, agriculture, so many things. But people hardly know about them. The last three, Nandini Nataraj is a transgender dancer, and we have her in one of our films, Arrow films. And Chinna Pillai in Madurai, she established a kind of a bank for village women. And Roni Pillai, of course, she is a scientist. And we also have her in that book on women scientists, she is there. Now, I've come almost to the end of my story. But I wrote one story long time ago. It was about the women's movement and kind of frustrations within the movement and what happens to us when we are all divided among ourselves and we're fighting for different things. So in that story, somebody writes a letter to a little girl. At the end of it, I said, what I've strung together for you all is 70 years of doubts, rebellion, battles, struggles. Let me call it a song of our times, which continues to this day. It is true, communal violence, caste wars, and human degradation have all dispirited us greatly. But our battle continues. We still raise our voices to safeguard rivers, trees, and animals, to safeguard human beings above all. You'll find in this song resonances of our joy, despair, disappointment, and exhilaration. The song is not complete. Let us hope in the coming years this song will be heard time and again, and many others will join to complete it. So believe that the song once begun ought to be completed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lakshmi. We can probably just take, since we've time, we could take one quick question and then we could just have a chat together if Dr. Lakshmi has time later.
Chat.
Chat is better?
Yeah,
So we're hanging out here, so that those of you who need to get out can get out, and we can just chat here or down in the archives. I should also confess that due to a lapse on my part, there is no tea outside. I do apologize. But I will make it up for you next time. Next time, by the way, is a little early, June 7th. So we're coming in 3 weeks instead of 4 weeks. So thank you so much again, Dr.